Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railway's Kinghorn Subdivision. We are kind of in the middle of nowhere. We're on the northeast corner of Scroll Lake here in the municipality of Greenstone. We are west of the community of Geraldton. We're probably in one of the most remote sections of the grade simply because it's not easy to get here. The nearest access road is 3.5 miles to the east, which is Wild Goose Beach Road. And so we had to bike in 3.5 miles just to start today's hike. And you can see Noah Luna's whining already. And the next closest access road to the west is 12 miles from here at Kinghorn Road. And the reason why it's even more remote here is you're going to see in a second. So we're starting the hike right off the get-go here. We're picking up right where we left off on a previous hike. And so where we are here is we're on this trestle at milepost 33.3 where this little creek empties into Scroll Lake. Now, well, the reason why it's so remote here and so challenging is this trestle is like an island. It is completely washed out on either end. So I'm just going to carefully make my way over here. You can see the enormous washout here. So you can see that probably a good 12-foot section maybe has been washed out. You can see that people had previously tried to put beams and pallets and all kinds of things to kind of bridge the gap, and it just kept getting wider and wider. You can see the conduit for the fiber optic cable here is kind of sticking out. Probably one of the reasons why this was washed out was you can see that there's part of a beaver dam here. We'll take a look at that a little bit closer in a second here. So this trestle, I believe, is 28 feet long, according to my profile map. It's a ballast deck trestle. You can see the ties are still in place on here. The side over here is in pretty rough shape. And so as we make our way the 28 feet over here, you can see the washout on this side, and you can see how the fiber optic cable is even more exposed on this side. You can see the water flowing through. Again, you can see another pallet here. I'm guessing people use this to, again, kind of bridge this gap until it got worse and worse. Here you can see all the debris that's piled up here. So certainly this is not a good thing for the fiber optic cable. Apparently the fiber optic cable here is a very important one. And hopefully these washouts get repaired. You can see the damage. It's worse here. The washout is even larger. So we're going to make our way over here carefully. And so you can see the extent of the washout here. You can see the bents, the piles for the trestle. We're going to get a little bit closer look at the bottom part here in a second. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drop down and go take a look at this. All right, so we've made our way down here beside the creek, flowing into Scroll, which is over there. We can't get terribly close here. I don't know if I can squeak any closer. There's a lot of grass and stuff and I can't really see much. Okay, there we go. So you can basically see that there's 3 bents, so 3 sets of piles. Lovely aroma of creosote that I love so much. So we can actually go under here. You can actually see all of the piles from the original or from a previous structure, and here you can see the mess. You can see why it washed out on either side. You can see all of this debris that's piled up here. This is the caution tape for the fiber optic cable. You can see that, that's there. Kind of gives you an idea of the underside. You can see that they've put the shingles between the cross beams and the bents and the piles. Other than that, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Probably given its age, it's probably been here for a while. Here you can actually see there's a rod sticking out of the old pile. get myself out of here, extricate myself. So anyway, we're gonna hop back up on the grade and just resume our journey to the west. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're going to leave the trestle behind. Luna's whining because Noah has moved ahead to go to milepost 34. So I'm not sure when this washout occurred. It's hard to tell. It doesn't look that it's there on the latest round of satellite pictures, but there's no way of knowing definitively. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Now, because we had to ride in already, Luna's whining here. Because we had to ride in already, I'm already tired. We're gonna see how this section is. Again, because of the washout, it's not well traveled. Luna's extra whiny here. She thinks she lost Noah. Okay, so what we're doing is we're making our way to milepost 34. So here we have a box for the fiber. So you can see 33.36, so that's the mileage on the Kinghorn. So for the original line, which we're going to talk about, what you have to do is you have to add 100.8 miles. So that would make it 134.16. Here you go, see we're going through a cutting. So another note about this, because of the way we had to do this hike, we have to, Luna, we have to do this hike backwards. And what I mean by backwards is normally we like to do the hikes, I've mentioned on many occasions before. We like to do the hikes. Wow, Luna's really antsy here. We like to do the hikes west to east and then back. We don't have a choice here. We actually have to start in the east and go west. And so the problem with that is I have absolutely no idea what is coming up. I don't know if there's sort of anything in the way in terms of, on the way in terms of culverts like here. Maybe we'll stop on the way back and see if there's something here. There's a base of a telegraph pole, so it just makes the hike that much more challenging here. So here's Squirrel Lake. So originally I had hoped that instead of riding our bikes in the 3.5 miles and then having to ride back 3.5 miles, that we would be able to get in. So Noah and I are currently staying at Wild Goose Beach Resort, if you're looking for somewhere to stay in the area. And there's a small little waterway that connects Wild Goose with Squirrel. I was hoping to get through that with my boat. Now the problem is I was told that that waterway, and I went and kind of looked at it a little bit, it's kind of very narrow. I probably wouldn't have been able to get through it with my boat. I'd probably have to use a smaller boat, and the problem is that with a smaller boat we wouldn't be able to get all our gear in there, all the bikes and everything. Okay, so we're kind of in uncharted territory here. We're kind of very remote. So let's do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. The Canadian Northern Company got their start in Manitoba in 1896, and they began buying up some charters and things like that. And their first big project was the construction of a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, and that occurred between 1899 and 1902. Got into another cut here. I thought we might see some cuts and some rock work in this section. And so after building to Winnipeg, the Canadian Northern Company began building lines all throughout the prairies, and they sort of became synonymous with the prairies and building through them. And they also started building north from Toronto, eventually reaching up into the Sudbury area. Now eventually they realized that in order for the company to be successful, they would need a transcontinental line. Now the problem with that is that Canadian Northern did not want to build this section of railway here because it was going to be very difficult. as you've seen with some of the terrain in this area, and therefore very costly. So they looked at all kinds of different options, even trying to get a running rights agreement with Canadian Northern. Now, unfortunately, none of that panned out. And so Canadian Northern was forced to build, and again, the construction lasted from 1896, from 1896, from 1911 through to 1914. The last spike was driven. Sorry, have to climb over this log. The last spike was driven on New Year's Day, 1914. Now the line opened for traffic in 1915. Another little cut coming up here. Now, unfortunately, the Canadian Northern Company, just as they finished their transcontinental network, started running into some financial difficulties. And by 1917, the company was basically bankrupt. And a lot of that was attributed to construction costs, such as building through this area and the mountains of British Columbia. Here's that cut. Again, you can see how grown in the grade is here. And so eventually the company had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And in 1918, Canadian Northern was forced to merge or amalgamate with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines. We have to pause for a second here. All right, let's resume our journey here. Just working our way through this very grown-in cut. Shh, Luna. She's missing Noah. And so, anyway, Canadian National became part of the Canadian Northern became part of Canadian National Railways. Now, the nationalization process took 5 years to complete because of the absorption of the Grand Trunk lines. And so, while that was going on, the name of this line changed. Luna. It was originally the Long Lake Subdivision of Canadian Canadian Northern Railway. Luna. The Long Lake Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway. And first it became the Long Lac Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. Now, again, very beautiful here, very grown in. And now something very significant happened in 1923. Canadian National began construction of a line from Long Lac, which is just to the east of us, so those 33.5 miles, to a place called Nipigon. Now, Nipigon is 30 miles to the north, and it lies on another railway line. It laid on the National Transcontinental, which was another Canada-wide railway line that was built in partnership between the Grand Trunk and the Canadian government. And so the idea of building a railway line to Nipigon was to shorten the travel time between Toronto and Winnipeg. So if trains traveled Toronto, Long Lac, Nipigon, Winnipeg, it was 100 miles shorter than going Toronto, Long Lac, Port Arthur, Winnipeg. And so that's the reason why it was built. Now, unfortunately, by doing that, what it did was it relegated this line to secondary status. It was no longer part of the main line. We do have a culvert coming up here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drop down and see if we can find that culvert. Or is it up ahead? It's up ahead, sorry. So in 1924, the name of this line changed again. It became the Kinghorn Subdivision, running from Long Lac to Jellicoe. And it continued as such until 1960, when the Kinghorn was merged with the more easterly Dorian subdivision, more westerly Dorian subdivision, and the whole line became the Kinghorn, running from Port Arthur to Long Lac to Port Arthur. That culvert's around here somewhere. We're gonna have to check on it on our way back. All right, so anyway, that amalgamation happened in 1960, along with a big kind of reorganization with CN, and the line continued to operate until 2005, when CN decided to discontinue service, and they began pulling up the rails between 2008 and 2010. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold up, I'm going to try to find that culvert, and then what we're going to do is we're going to resume our journey. Noah's just in front of us there.